There we go. Welcome to December 2023 Tempo Community Call. I'd like to thank Zach for running last month's. I can't remember. We had some important internal meeting. I can't remember what was going on, but couldn't attend. And I think Zach did a great job. Uploaded the video to YouTube and watched most of it, I think. But yeah, it was a good call. And we got a pretty beefy one today. Quite a few people in here. As always, I'll repeat this, but questions, Q&A kind of stuff, AMA stuff is, of course, welcome. I'm going to chat through this agenda here, and I'll probably yell at some other people from Grafana to talk about some of these subjects. But if you have questions, you can just unmute and ask. You can throw them in the old Google chat here. You can put them in the doc, whatever is most comfortable for you. And this is not really a prepared presentation. You may be surprised to learn that what you're about to see is not rehearsed or highly prepared. So it can be a conversation. Feel free to, just ask and talk, and we can work our way through it. Cool. All right. So we'll start at the top with, I would say, the third most exciting bullet point, TraceQL Extensions. So myself and Marty and a couple other engineers on Tempo spent the last couple of months working on a doc to extend TraceQL to handle new data types like arrays and maps. Ooh, my bad, just arrays, as well as some of the other scopes we don't support, like events and links, as well as a couple other like nitpicky things, just kind of like small touch-up things to the language, like quoted attributes and such. So that first link there, TraceQL Extensions, is our design doc PR to the repo. We already have a little chatter on it. And we encourage anyone to jump in. We want to make sure there's a good voice of the community in there before we merge and people feel comfortable and have given good feedback before we merge. Once we merge, we'll probably do some more active development on this, and it'll be a little kind of like locked in. Mario already came up with a real good suggestion, which is to move away from the scope, which is kind of thought was funny, but instrumentation makes a lot more sense. I think we have an internal conversation right now to make sure that name's not changing, but we definitely want to support that scope as well. There's this instrumentation scope where like an OTel client will store the name of the client and the version and probably like information about the language or whatever. So take a look at that if you get a chance. Is there anything worth kind of reviewing? Maybe it makes sense to kind of dig in here, right? I'll hit some highlights, I suppose. I think that's likely wise. And that'll give people a chance to ask specific questions if they have them, or just kind of get a quick overview of the situation. The first one is actually already merged. This is actually in main, but I don't think this one is particularly controversial. So I feel like it was safe to go ahead. But Tempo did not support a set of characters, like weird characters like white space, tab, these kind of things in attribute names, and now we do. So you can use quoted attribute names to basically throw anything in there you want. Other characters like curly braces were kind of reserved, parentheses, some things like that were not allowed to. Right, emojis were supported before. You don't need quotes for emojis. You can happily throw like a smiley
Even
face.
in attribute names?
Yeah.
Oh,
I'm pretty sure,
okay.
yeah. Try it. But I'm like 99% sure right now you could, if you were so inclined, put a little like pig emoji or something in your instrumentation and query that with Tempo just for fun, and it would all work just fine. I feel like I've seen that. We do, yeah. We have some things. We have people who have been putting emojis in not span names, but in span attributes. I don't think I've ever seen it in an attribute name. I've seen them in attribute values, though. That does work, I know. Cool. So new scopes, kind of review this. We have the instrumentation scope, and we've talked about that. We want to treat events like scopes, and we want to treat links like scopes, which changes things a little bit. I have this future considerations paragraph that talks a little bit about maybe some concerns that we had, and we didn't want to push the language too far. So we've made something of an incremental change here to allow event and link querying. And we're looking to see how people use this before we commit to more complex syntax or to, some other features. Like we really want to see how people use that, I suppose. Intrinsics. So we've changed the syntax for intrinsics a little bit. Intrinsics will always be scoped, and we're going to use this colon here and then the name. So a lot of these have what we're going to call legacy, and we're not going to remove those. So for instance, you can say root name right now. And we're going to add like trace colon root name. And this allows us to extend our intrinsics. And you see a lot more new ones here. It allows us to extend those in a way that makes more sense instead of just like constantly adding these new keywords. We're going to have scopes, and beneath the scopes, we'll have intrinsic names that I think work better. The colon is there to distinguish, to disambiguate between an attribute with that name and the intrinsic that also would share that name. So that's why we settled on the colon. And like I said, you'll always be able to type name. We're not removing this. This is just going to be the new way we add any intrinsics to allow for, just better flexibility and easier discovery and, just like a better pattern around these, basically. I think that's the big ones here. List access, so array access. Let me talk about that. We're going to do array access by index and just kind of a general wildcard. So I don't care which element of the array is this value. I'm going to search them all. So those are kind of we felt like that met most use cases. In particular, I guess the use case we're targeting in particular is the OTel spec suggests putting all values for a header, for an HTTP header in an array. So that's what we were like thinking about when we developed that feature. Cool. Oop. If there's any questions, concerns, feel free to ask here or just jump in that PR. Like I said, we're really looking for some community consensus and discussion and chatter, and we will move forward with the changes probably next year once we get to some kind of consensus. Cool. Next up on the list, this is going to be how many items we have. This is the fourth most exciting. We're going backwards here. The fourth most exciting element on the list is we've added 2 caching PRs. The caching story and tempo has been pretty weak forever, basically. And both of these will give you more flexibility, front-end caching, so like an actual query directly, like a job. So if somebody has a dashboard or they're repeating a query often, it's just going to catch that immediately. And then we also have this idea of like a page level cache where like almost every read from the Parquet file would be cached. It's a little disingenuous because we can't really know it's a page. We just have these kind of like opaque read ranges. And we know it's not a footer. And we know it's not a couple other indexes, but that's about all we know. And so we're going to try this internally. I've already talked to Kim Nylander up there about providing some guidance once we better understand. So the docs will have a nice holistic guide. We already have kind of like a search performance guide, and this will definitely fall in that category. How to size these caches, how to understand it if you're getting a lot of misses, or if you need to increase or reduce or whatever. So the caching PRs are exciting because it's going to let us do better performance. We've spent a lot of time this year on performance, but this is kind of a good next step to reduce calls to the back end, of course. Metrics PRs. I'm going to let Marty talk about this. Zach was also involved. He's welcome to put his 2 cents in. I'm going to put these as the most exciting. This is number 1 here. So Marty, I think everyone's super excited about just generally metrics from traces. I'm going to tell everyone that we're running it in dev right now. Just let them know this is actually happening, and I'll let you give us some good overview.
Yeah, so in the previous community call, we shared a link to the proposal. So that was like maybe a month or so ago, collecting some comments and things like that. Well, we still feel really good about that direction. So, I mean, we've been proceeding like at full pace, implementing metrics. And so we put up a couple PRs here for like the first steps. We have gone a lot further, like separately, but like here's the first couple things. So definitely there's a lot of work to do. But you can click on those PRs, take a look at, see what we're doing. They're not useful on their own because like there's still more PRs coming. But yeah, so metrics will work a lot like search, I think. right? You can kind of think of it like that. There will be a lot of work, like the queries will scale out really far for the back end. We're going to query recent data from the generators, right, instead of the ingesters. So it kind of has that split between like back end and things like that. I don't know. I mean, maybe like if we say no promises, like we could actually play with it in dev. Do we want to? I think it just is good to have something to look at. Yeah.
You need a no judgment environment, Marty.
Well, it was crashing like 30 minutes ago until I fixed something. So yeah.
It's up to you, man. If you want to share, share. But
Yeah, actually, I would like some feedback. So something that we were talking about, make sure this is, okay, cool. Yeah. Can everybody see this? Okay. Yeah. Okay, so the way we're starting is actually like a Prometheus compatible endpoint. So just this is the best way for testing. We'll have like a dedicated UI. This would be built into Tempo and things like that. But to get started, we have actually implemented the Prometheus compatible API. So, obviously some things are grumpy, right? Like this isn't PromQL. Lookups and things don't work. But I mean, this is like a real query that we could run. And I kind of just have it pinned here to this backend range. That's like, decent. Yeah, the way it works is like you can have any TraceQL query, right? And instead of doing a search, you're just going to pipe that to like a metrics aggregation. So here I'm doing a rate and I'm doing a grouping by span name. That grouping is completely optional. So I could just like run like this and just look at some errors. Or maybe something like this isn't what we need, right? Yeah, so there are some really cool queries that we can find. Yeah, definitely need to work on some better performance and things like that. Oh, -1, what is that?
somebody
There
has a
must there
-1.
must be some -1s. Yeah, so this is kind of interesting because I'm grouping by HTTP status code. These are just the kind of things that we're thinking about, and this kind of feedback is really good. So this is all spans grouped by status code, and then a lot of spans don't have them. So actually, this is like missing. So that's a little bit different than if I were to put, a filter in here, right? Right. If I were to do that, then I'd ensure that the value would exist. So I don't know. It's kind of interesting. I like the ability to have both. I like the kind of like the ability to have TraceQL in here, like to get really hone in on that query and kind of like be able to tell the difference between those two things. So adding that filter performance was a lot better. So it will have a lot of the same like access and like read patterns as search, right? So the more precise and like the better filtering power you put on your query, like it'll run a lot better. So another query that we thought was really cool, I mean, this is cool, but this is something that I think is really cool that we can't answer today. So if we were to do something like this, like plot data by root name. So root name is the span name of the root, like the very root span. What is that name? And so we were trying to answer a question of ourselves internally, like where I have all this ingested data in this environment, but where is it coming from? And just doing something like service name or right, that just shows you what the distribution of the ingested data was, but it doesn't show you what the cause of it was, right? So root name here is actually the initiator of the trace. And so this is really cool because this is actually showing us like the sampling rule or the service that started it. So if you wanted to, reduce volume or increase volume or change the distribution of your data, that's what you need is like that sampling rule, right? Like what initiated the trace. So like that would be really cool. Yeah, and you can group by anything in here. So maybe if there was an attribute that actually had the sampling rule name, I can't remember if there's some instrumentation that has that, but you could use that as well. Yeah.
Yeah, this query is really cool for all the reasons Marty said. And And I think at some point in the future, maybe next year, we'd like to start looking at a nice usage insights kind of story for Tempo. Who's creating what, and what teams do I talk to adjust volume, and all these things like you can do in Loki and you can do in Mimir. And this, I think, is the basis of it, right? What root span and what root service is really generating all my traces, or is responsible for the biggest percentage of my volume, and then I can go talk to those teams and improve that situation.
This is something that's really cool, is because the raw data is the spans. There's kind of infinite precision here. So instead of 1 second granularity, I could go less than that. So using the step interval from the Prometheus interface. So here, like these would be, maybe I could do like that. Yeah, this wasn't showing the milliseconds, but they are in there.
Pavel has a question.
Yep.
Yeah, maybe a related question to how much data is ingested. Is there a query or maybe a metric on Tempo or the collector, the auto collector, that gives you information how much traces are reported per, let's say, node or namespace or even pod?
Yeah, so like if you had an attribute like this, this is one of our attributes, like resource.cluster. So that's not the number of traces, this would be the number of spans, right? But like this would show you the environmental data of your volume. I mean, I don't even know if this cluster has more than one. Yeah, okay, so it has a copy of a couple things. So this is kind of, I think, what you're asking. Like whatever attributes you have, pod, container, resource, or cluster namespace, you could group on those as well. Is trace count important? Like, is that something that you would need to see as the number of traces versus spans?
It depends, but maybe number of traces, spans, or even like bytes, perhaps.
Yeah, bytes would be cool. And I think that's something we don't have here. I was thinking about that the other day. Yeah.
What does it mean,
I don't know.
How many bytes is a trace or a span? Like, how are you counting it? Is a really tough question. We've run into this a lot in Tempo. The question of like, how big is the span in Parquet? How big is the span in Proto? How big is the span if you just count like the number of characters and int32s and other things, like in memory, basically? It's a tough question for sure. So that I don't know. I think Pavel, I like that idea because it's the same kind of question. And bytes is better than spans, of course, if you're looking at ingestion. But I think we'd have to figure out what does bytes mean, how to measure it.
And something that like is a unit that is most correlated with cost.
Yeah. And span is close, of course, but it's not perfect, right? We do have, there is the bytes per second at the distributor level, so you can know that, and it's per tenant. So if you had like a multi-tenant setup, then you could know that, but that's as granular as it gets, I think. We do have a debug mode where we'll produce metrics in the distributor with more advanced or like higher granularity of labels. Maybe extending the debug mode to include bytes would make sense. It's not quite the answer you want, because I think you want this like as a constant all the time ability to evaluate. But we do use tools like that if we're having issues internally with ingestion.
Yeah, essentially, I want to answer a question like which namespace or how much data which each namespace is reporting.
Yeah.
So the generator could already answer some of that. I think it has like a span length thing that it can tally. Hey, Conrad, do you know about, like, if you just wanted an overview, I think the generator could show you ingest per those high level things. You can customize those dimensions. And I think it calculates also the span length.
Yeah, we have metrics for the span duration for every span individually that you can break down by the dimension.
Is there a span size, like the amount of bytes?
And
or
yeah,
something?
we also have bytes. Yeah, I think that was added like a couple of months already now.
Yeah.
Cool.
Right. So this, like TraceQL metrics, I think like the goal for this is more like the precise like aggregation. Like if you had a TraceQL query that would really hone in. I mean, obviously it would we would support like that high level stuff too. But I think it would be like most of the usefulness is going to come out of like looking for errors or looking at P95 durations and things like that.
I think I have a very stupid question, but what is the time range I can use to run these queries?
Oh, I have it zoomed in here small. But yeah, I mean, the long term, it needs to be like days. Yeah. The generator is real metrics, so that will always perform best, right? I mean, we'll obviously try to improve performance here as best we can. And like with page caching that we mentioned, like there's a lot of things that I think we can do, but it will never surpass real metrics like the generator, because those are pre-computed. That will always be the best.
Yeah, maybe a future improvement is somehow basically like a bytes intrinsic or size intrinsic at the span level, and maybe we could just dunk the proto bytes in there. Because that's what we use for our rate limiting, is we just ask proto how big it is. That's kind of like an in-memory representation of the trace. So maybe that's the right path, like a future intrinsic called bytes, and then all this works. You just do rate. Yeah, you could do some rate of size by whatever thing you want to do, essentially.
Yeah. Okay. I think we're good playing around with metrics in dev. So cool.
Didn't break.
Yeah. Cool.
Mostly worked there, didn't it? Nice. All right. Problem with generator cardinality on the metric store. We filled our law to keep the cardinality lower. Yeah, I know. So that's something I really was hoping to do at the beginning of next year, maybe, is looking at cardinality reduction in the generator. There's a lot of tools, but it's a lot of like hand crafting of config. I think we currently have 2 histograms, client and server. I think we could just drop one, because one is used for the service graph and one is utterly unused. And there might be some value in knowing both, but I don't think it's necessarily worth the amount of series we're spending, because a histogram, of course, always blows up your series. So I think it would be really valuable at the beginning of next year to look at the generator. We have a lot of requests for the generator. I think we could reduce cardinality. I think it's an area that languished a bit this year because of how heavily we are invested in TraceQL and Parquet. And maybe we can revisit it again some next year and see if we can't improve there. That's a good call. We've had a lot of feature requests and really not had time to dig in to the generator much this year. All right. Year in review. I have some notes here.
You missed one.
Oh.
You missed vPark.
Oh, vPark 3. That's the least exciting of all. It's exciting. It's the fifth most exciting one. But it's going to be default in 2.3. We really would have made it. It was really ready in 2.2, but we just wanted a good way to roll back, essentially. So it will be default in 2.3. It will be ready to go in the next version of Tempo. I'd encourage you to enable it now. If you're operating a Tempo cluster, it's more performant. There are more balloons in vPark 3. There is are you doing that on purpose, Lucas, or is it just there you go, it's just happening? Okay, your computer really is excited about Parquet 3.
I think this is one of the new Mac gesture things that I keep turning off and it keeps turning on somehow. I don't understand it.
All right, I think you could just tell your Mac was excited about, your MacBook was excited about vPark 3. Yeah. So anyways, it'll be default in 2.3. Look to the guides. We have some really good guides about how to configure that to really massively improve performance. Basically, it adds the ability to pull large attributes out of your main attributes column, and we've seen really, really strong performance gains from using vPark 3 in some of those configs. So heavily recommend that. And finally, the year in review. I made it there. this is the second most exciting thing. I'm giving metrics the first, top billing over a year in review. It's been a really, really good year for Tempo. I'm going to use incoherently as what I think I said, semi-incoherently, so it'll be half meaningful. If anyone else would like to add from the Grafana team, of course, please do, about how you feel about the past year, and of course, anyone from the community as well. But internally, I've been really excited about Tempo this year. It's just been a great year for the project. This time last year, we really didn't even have TraceQL, or we definitely didn't have TraceQL. We really didn't have vParquet. It was like an experimental backend in 1.4. And we really kind of spent a year building an enormous feature set and delivered it at the beginning of this year. At the end, it was basically the end of January. January 31st is when 2.0 was cut. And we have just been spending an enormous amount of time improving performance and adding features to TraceQL. And I just think it's been a huge leap forward in the capabilities of the database. We've really seen a lot of response internally, close to a 10x increase in usage internally, and just been a huge year for the project for sure. We've seen increases in community involvement. I've been super psyched about Red Hat's involvement. Been a lot of great PRs from Red Hat. They put up the Tempo operator, and it's been a great partnership with Red Hat to improve Tempo. I think they have 2 or 3 really solid PRs up in the past month, like really getting into the weeds, some Parquet improvements, or some, we have a improvement on getting backend tags from Red Hat. So it's just been a great year for the community. It's been a great year for the database. And I really think next year is going to be the year of metrics, and it's just going to be another leap forward. And hopefully the last leap forward, because I don't know if my poor graying beard can take too many more. But this previous year with TraceQL, next year with metrics, I think we'll really be hitting something solid. This has been a big year, and I expect basically a similar year from next year with the addition of metrics and the capabilities of the database and the excitement surrounding it. I'd also like to thank they didn't join new this year, but our 3 newest developers, Adrian, Jenny Pham, and Suraj, none of who are on this call, but hopefully they'll all watch it. They've done great work. They've really kind of come into their own this year. And in particular, Adrian he delivered vParquet 3 as well, and is currently working on 4, and has just been a great asset for the team, and really excited about the growth of our team and what we're able to do. So I'd like to thank you all for a great year. This time last year, Tempo was okay, and I think we're really good now, and I think we're going to be amazing next year. So hopefully I'll remember to do a year in review next year, and maybe I'll even watch this video and remember what I said, and then I can kind of build on that. But it's been fantastic, and thank you all. And yeah, let's do another great year at Tempo. Let's build something new. And now Marty's computer is excited about Tempo.
I don't know how to trigger them, like with the effects or something. I was just clicking the button.
Maybe it's things I'm saying. Maybe I say like excited or something like that, and your balloons are ballooning.
There, see.
Did somebody raise their hand? I thought I saw that.
No, I was going for the emojis.
I missed the emojis. Hit the hand instead. All right.
I don't have the fancy effects. I got a lame computer apparently.
My computer also lacks lasers and cool effects. Kunrad also missed the emoji button and hit the hand button instead. All right. Well, if anybody has any additions, any AMA, any Q&A, any A's, or would like to talk about Tempo at all, feel free. I'll give you a little bit, and then we'll move forward and wrap it up. Call it a year. Yeah. All right, team. Thank you all for a great year. Let's make next one better. And we'll see you in January. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care.